I'll never forget the night Grandpa Jim and Grandma Jane went full tilt into their alien hunting obsession. It had been simmering for years, but that fateful evening, it boiled over into complete insanity. I should have seen the signs earlier, the stacks of UFO magazines, the late nights spent watching fuzzy Bigfoot videos, the backyard experiments trying to make contact. Grandpa had always been a bit of an oddball, but Grandma was supposed to be the level-headed one. I guess the truth was finally out there for both of them. It started like any other night. I was over at their place, helping Grandma prep dinner while Grandpa tinkered in the basement. Suddenly, he burst through the door, wild-eyed and frantic. "Jane, you've got to see what I've discovered," he shouted, not even acknowledging my presence. Grandma set down her knife and followed him without a word. My curiosity getting the better of me, I trailed after them down the creaky wooden stairs. The dank basement was filled with Grandpa's latest contraptions, a tangle of wires, antennas, and blinking lights. In the middle of it all, a dusty old radio crackled with white noise. "Listen," Grandpa hissed, leaning towards the static. "I've been picking up these encoded messages all week." I strained my ears but only heard random pops and hisses. Grandma, however, seemed transfixed by the sound. "You don't think," she whispered. Grandpa nodded solemnly. "We've been receiving signals. From them." A chill ran down my spine. There was no mistaking the reverence in his tone. They actually thought these gibberish broadcasts were coming from real, live aliens. Before I could protest, the radio crackled again with a strange, warbling sound. Grandpa's eyes went wide as saucers. "Did you hear that?" he gasped. "Coordinates!" "They're giving us coordinates." He scrambled for a pen and paper, scribbling down what looked like complete nonsense. I tried to intervene, to talk some sense into them both, but they were already too far gone. "We have to go," Grandma cried, grabbing a duffel bag from the corner. Out tumbled an assortment of weird gadgets, EMF meters, night vision goggles, even a well-worn copy of the Dianetics handbook. "You can't be serious," I said as they started suiting up like they were preparing for a moon launch. "This is crazy, even for you two." Grandpa fixed me with a look that could bore holes through steel. "Don't you understand, Jen? This is what we've been waiting for our whole lives. First contact." I shook my head in disbelief. There was no talking them out of this. With a resigned sigh, I grabbed the spare set of goggles. If they were going to get themselves probed by little green men, I might as well be there to watch. The coordinates led us deep into the woods outside of town, the kind of place you'd expect to find an abandoned cult compound or a serial killer's burial ground. The night was thick and muggy, our only light coming from the bobbing beams of our headlamps. Grandpa took point, that ancient radio held up like a dowsing rod, as he tried to zero in on the signal's source. Grandma wasn't far behind, an EMF meter in each hand as she scanned the trees for any electromagnetic anomalies. "Getting strong readings over here," she called out at one point, the needles on her meters doing a little jitterbug. "You were right, Jim. They're closing in." My heart was pounding a mile a minute, but Grandpa just grinned like a kid on Christmas Day. "Told you I'd get us to the mothership." We pressed on, deeper into the inky darkness. Suddenly, Grandpa stopped dead in his tracks, the radio emitting a piercing tone that drilled right into my skull. "There!" he crowed, pointing his light towards a small clearing ahead. At first, I didn't see anything. Then it shimmered into view, a gigantic saucer-shaped craft, its hull glistening like oil on water. I felt the blood drain from my face. There was no mistaking it. A real, bona fide alien spaceship, just sitting there in the middle of the forest like it was no big deal. "Stay close," Grandpa murmured, clutching his radio with white knuckles. "And whatever you do, don't make any sudden moves." We crept forward, the three of us in a ragged line. As we neared the ship, its surface seemed to warp and undulate. as if it were made of liquid metal. Up close, it looked less like a saucer and more like a gigantic steel egg, mottled and pockmarked from atmospheric entry. Grandma reached out a trembling hand, running her fingers along the strange, ridged surface. "It's warm," she marveled. "Like it's alive." A narrow seam appeared in the ship's flank, sliding open with a hiss of vapor. My heart leaped into my throat as a gangly, spindly figure emerged, silhouetted against the harsh interior light. It was unmistakably alien, a tangle of limbs surrounding a bulbous torso, with two glowing slits where its eyes should be. It fixed us with that unblinking stare, cocking its head in an almost curious manner. "Greetings," Grandpa stammered, giving a little wave. "We come in peace?" The alien made a trilling sound, like a computer booting up. Then, in a burst of electronic crackles and pops, it spoke in a bizarre, garbled tongue that made my brain feel like it was being microwaved. "What did it say?" I hissed frantically. "What's it saying?" I'm not sure," Grandpa admitted, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The universal translator must be on the fritz." Grandma, meanwhile, seemed utterly transfixed by the creature before us. Slowly, carefully, she set down her meters and removed her goggles, as if trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "We mean you no harm," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been waiting for this day for a very long time." The alien cocked its head again, trilling in that inscrutable language. Then, to my utter astonishment, it reached out one of its spindly limbs and gently touched Grandma's cheek. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink. It was like she and the alien had formed some kind of telepathic bond at that moment. Its trilling slowed, becoming a soft, melodic hum that seemed to reverberate in my very bones. I think I understand," Grandma said at last, her eyes shining with wonder. "They're not here to hurt us. They're explorers, just like us." Grandpa looked at her, dumbfounded. You can understand it?" She nodded slowly. "Not with words, but I can sense its meaning, its intent. It's saying its ship was damaged fleeing from something hostile." The alien trilled again, more urgently this time. Grandma's face fell. "They need our help," she said gravely, "to repair their vessel and escape. Before the hunters arrive." A cold knot formed in the pit of my stomach. Hunters? What in the 7 galaxies were we dealing with here? Before I could ask, a deafening boom shook the forest, making the trees sway like blades of grass. We spun around to see a massive fireball blooming on the horizon, debris raining down all around us. The alien let out a piercing shriek of terror. More of those nightmarish forms began to emerge from the ship, scurrying about in a frenzy as the woods dissolved into chaos. "They're here," Grandma cried over the din. "The hunters have found them." Grandpa grabbed her hand and started pulling her away at a dead run. "We've got to get out of here. Now." I didn't need to be told twice. Whipping around, I bolted after them, the sounds of destruction nipping at my heels. Explosions, unearthly shrieks, the thunderous report of weapon fire. We ran blindly, branches whipping our faces until I could barely see. At one point, I risked a glance over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. Towering above the treetops, a gargantuan shape blotted out the stars, a colossal, biomechanical leviathan bristling with armaments and sensor arrays. From its underbelly poured a swarm of smaller hunter drones, raining indiscriminate death from above. The aliens' shrill cries echoed all around us as we fled for our lives. I felt something white-hot sear my calf and went sprawling, biting my tongue to stifle a scream. Grandpa was there in an instant, hauling me back to my feet as the forest burned around us. "Don't stop," he roared, half dragging me along. "They're right behind us." We burst from the tree line in a shower of splinters and smoke. Grandma's car was right where we'd left it, still idling quietly on the gravel road. Wasting no time, Grandpa shoved me into the back seat, while Grandma floored it, the tires kicking up rocks as we peeled out. I huddled on the floorboards, cradling my wounded leg as the night's insanity played over in my mind. Aliens. Giant killer robots. A battle raged in the woods behind us. It was too much to process all at once. I must have blacked out at some point, because the next thing I knew, we were pulling into their driveway in a squeal of brakes. "Inside, quickly," Grandpa shouted, bundling me out of the car. I could barely walk, but he and Grandma half carried me down into the basement, slamming and bolting the door behind us. Only then did we all finally stop to catch our breath, huddled amid Grandpa's machines in the dingy half-light. Grandma cradled my leg, gently cleaning the burn with a rag soaked in something that stung like 1,000 bees. What was that thing?" I managed to gasp out. Those hunters." Grandpa shook his head warily, looking every one of his 92 years. "I'm not sure, Jen. But whatever they weren't messing around." A loud thump from above made us all jump. Something heavy was moving around in the upstairs, accompanied by a strange, skittering sound. "Oh no." Grandma's eyes went wide with realization. They followed us home. Sure enough, a series of frantic trills echoed from the top of the basement stairs. I felt my blood run cold as one of the aliens came slinking into view, its spindly limbs gripping the steps as it descended. It fixed us with those unblinking eyes, letting out a mournful keen. Grandma was on her feet in an instant, hands raised in a placating gesture. "Easy, easy," she murmured, as if trying to calm a spooked animal. "We won't hurt you. You're safe here." The alien revealed what it was holding behind its back. It was a tiny replica of the ship that we saw earlier. No, it was their ship. Just somehow shrunk down to the size of a baseball. The alien trilled again, more insistently this time. I could sense its desperation, its fear. It knew those hunters were still out there, still hunting, and they were closing in. Grandpa met my gaze, his jaw set in grim determination. "Get the tools," he said quietly. "We're going to need everything we've got." I didn't argue. Ignoring the searing pain in my leg, I started gathering up anything that might be useful: pliers, wrenches, lengths of cable, even a battered old laser pointer I'd gotten as a kid. Grandma kept up a steady stream of soothing murmurs, trying to calm the frantic alien, while Grandpa began inspecting its damaged flank with a handheld blacklight. Circuitry and conduits lay exposed, sparking and fizzing from some unseen breach. "This might take a while," he grunted, already getting to work on the baseball-sized ship. "But if we can patch up that fuel line, reroute power from the auxiliary cells." A thunderous crash from above cut him off, followed by the sound of splintering wood and screeching metal. The hunters had arrived, and they weren't messing around. "They're breaking in," I yelled over the cacophony. "What do we do?" Grandpa didn't even look up from his work, his hands moving with a surgeon's precision. "We fight," he said simply. "We fight, and we give this poor bastard a chance to get off this rock." Grandma nodded resolutely, snatching up a heavy pipe from the workbench. "For too long, we've dreamed of this day. Well, the day is finally here." She tossed me the pipe, and I caught it with a grim nod. The alien watched us both, trilling in what almost sounded like gratitude. The first hunter drone came scrabbling down the stairs, all jagged metal and whirring mechanics. Grandma swung with everything she had, caving in its armored casing like it was made of tinfoil. More were coming, far too many for us to hold off indefinitely. But we didn't have a choice, not with an injured alien relying on us, not with the fate of worlds potentially hanging in the balance. So we fought, the three of us, putting everything we had into driving back that unrelenting tide of hunters. Grandpa worked feverishly, his hands slick with hydraulic fluid, as he struggled to get the alien's ship operational again. Grandma was a whirlwind, that pipe flashing through the air as she smashed drone after drone to scrap. And me? I fought like my life depended on it. Because it did. I fought for Grandpa and Grandma, for the alien and its crew, for every other so-called crackpot dreamer who'd ever looked up at the stars and dared to wonder, what if? The battle raged for what felt like an eternity. Sparks flew, metal shrieked, and strange alien ichor splattered the walls in thick gouts. We were battered, exhausted, fighting until the very last. Then, finally, it happened. A low whine built up somewhere in the alien craft's core, growing in pitch until my fillings vibrated. Grandpa stepped back, a wild grin splitting his face as the ship's engines flared to life with the sound of tearing atmosphere. "That's it," he crowed, slamming his hand down on an oversized lever. "Full emergency burn. Get that son of a bitch out of our galaxy." The alien let out one last, piercing trill of acknowledgement. Then, in a blinding rush of light and force, its ship was gone, leaving only a smoldering crater where our basement used to be. As the ringing in my ears slowly faded, I became aware of Grandma pulling me into a fierce hug, tears of joy and relief streaming down her cheeks. Grandpa stood beside us, battered and bruised, but beaming from ear to ear. "We did it," he murmured, almost disbelieving. "After all these years, we finally made a difference." I could only nod mutely, too overwhelmed for words. We'd been through hell and back that night, but in the end, we'd helped save something. Something incredible. Something that proved we were not alone in this vast, weird universe after all. As the first rays of dawn peeked over the smoldering tree line, Grandpa let out a wheezing chuckle and clapped me on the shoulder. "So, Jen," he said, eyes twinkling, "who wants to go chupacabra hunting next weekend?"